So hello, welcome. My name is Jill Nunez, and I'm a Sounds Right trainer based here in the US. And today from Sounds Right, we also have Laura with us, who is our content creator and actually has done a lot of hard work on some of the decodable books and texts we have. So it's great to have her here with us too today. Today we are going to talk about decodable readers and harnessing their power. And so we're going to share the fundamentals of using decodable readers with your students, their role in effective phonics instruction, and give some practical implementation strategies and tips. All right, so just a bit about me before we get going. Before joining Sounds Right, I was a classroom teacher and instructional coach. I began my career in education as a kindergarten teacher back in 2005 and taught in a variety of settings at both the elementary and middle school levels. I was fortunate enough to join the first Sounds Right online cohort in the summer of 2020. And then I began implementing Sounds Right as an intervention that fall in my school. So I've seen the results of benefits of using Sounds Right in a linguistic approach in the school setting, and most recently tutoring students as well. And I truly believe the approach grounded in years of research is the best way to teach reading and writing. But I'm really happy to be here with you today to talk about decodable books and readers. So in today's webinar, we're going to discuss the role of decodable books in learning to read and how they support your phonics instruction, as well as what exactly makes a book decodable and best practices when using them. What comes after decodable books? This is a question I get a lot, and how to transition out of them. I will talk a bit about the Sounds Right approach, including the Sounds Right scope and sequence. And then finally, we'll take a look at the Sounds Right decodable collection. So during that time, hopefully I will answer some of the questions you might have. Feel free to pop them in the chat as we go along. Laura will be monitoring that, but we do have time at the end for questions as well. So learning to read is a complex process. It enables us to translate symbols into meaning. Unlike learning to speak and listen, learning to read is not a natural process, and it's not something we learn just by being exposed to it. It's something that needs to be taught explicitly and systematically. Contemporary reading science supports the simple view of reading theoretical framework for understanding how we read. So the simple view of reading by Go and Tummer concluded that reading comprehension is a combination of two mutually dependent and important processes: being able to decode words, the word recognition component, and being able to understand words, the language comprehension piece. A deficit in either process impedes the development of a good reader, resulting in a reader with good decoding skills but poor comprehension, or a good reader with good language comprehension but poor decoding skills. So we know both word recognition and language comprehension need to be taught explicitly and in tandem to develop reading comprehension. With decodable text, we're focused primarily on that word recognition component of reading comprehension. So once students have learned their letter-sound correspondences in the context of single words, decodable books enable them to practice and gain accuracy with that word recognition. So what is a decodable book? Decodable books are controlled texts, meaning they're specifically written texts that are consistent with the phonics students have learned in a classroom. These books are often referred to as phonically controlled or decodable. Sometimes you'll hear them decodable text, decodable readers, decodable books. They all mean the same thing. Of course, all books are technically decodable if you know the code. So what's decodable will depend on what a student has been taught, and it will change as they learn more of the code. Eventually, everything will be decodable for your students. But for students who are just beginning to learn to read, it's important that they begin to practice reading and writing containing the sound spelling correspondences that they have been taught as soon as possible. So you see here on the slide some of our first, when we're first teaching our youngest learners, some books that they might be reading. So let's look at an example of a decodable text. Let's say there's a student, Sarah, and she has learned the sound spelling correspondences a, I, m, s, and t in class. Those are the first 5 sound spelling correspondences we teach in Sounds Right, so that's why I'm using that as an example here. In order to consolidate Sarah's use and understanding of these sounds and spellings, she needs to read and write simple words containing these sounds. Words like mat, sat, and it. Decodable readers give students the opportunity to practice reading the sounds they've already learned. Decodable texts are controlled to primarily include words with the code knowledge in a specific sequence. Again, those ones that they have learned in class. These texts also include some high-frequency words that have been taught. This ensures the beginning reader can practice using the code knowledge they've learned by reading words with the code in the context in sentences and stories, making the process meaningful, relevant, and enjoyable. Okay. So there's just one page from that book. Again, you'll notice we're very controlled. It's only using the sound spelling correspondences, those 5 I talked about that in Sounds Right we teach in that first unit. You can't always have the most robust stories with 5 sound spelling correspondences, but the important part is they're getting lots of practice and repetition. So now let's look at an example of a non-decodable text. I went into my book collection, probably from the time I was teaching kindergarten and 2nd grade, so an old book down in my basement. And I was looking for whatever that I had that was labeled earliest reader. So this book I found was from step 1 here. It's aimed at, you'll notice it's aimed at preschool and kindergarten children. And the description says, if your children know the alphabet and are eager to begin reading, this step and book is perfect for them. The focus is going to be on big fonts and easy words that rhyme with picture clues, okay? So I just took a picture of a page in the book, and you'll notice here on these 2 pages, a preschooler probably does not have the code knowledge, and if they know their alphabet, I'm not sure they're at a place where they would be able to read game time and checkers. We see them really using those picture clues to read the word. Okay, this is just one page from the book. It actually does have repeating patterns, but again, not controlled in the way of thinking about sound spellings the students have learned. This book is about Jessie from a Toy Story who wants to play games with her friends Buzz and Woody. They are good buddies, but they keep telling her, no, only 2. So they pull out a game like checkers, and then they say, no, only 2. Then they pull out another game, seesaw, no, only 2. So we get this repeating pattern, but it's not the good kind of repetition, okay? So it does have repetition in this level of reader, but it's not the good kind. Let's think about... so they have that repetition, and again, we're using those picture clues and just remembering what comes next. When I would say Buzz and Woody, the child might remember good buddies. So it's kind of that repeating pattern. They're remembering based on them hearing it multiple times and those picture clues. In this respect, these readers really haven't changed since the 1960s. If we think back to our decodable book example, we have repetition here too, but this is the good kind of repetition. We have repetition in our phonemic awareness skills. Students are getting lots of repetition with those skills of blending, segmenting, and phoneme manipulation. Okay, so hopefully just with this example, you can see how the decodable controlled texts provide that opportunity to practice their skills instead of relying on pictures or guessing. This is certainly a more effective way to strengthen the brain's neural connections. So why are decodable books important? Our objective in providing decodable text is to enable students to foster fluency. There is a considerable body of research evidence indicating that automaticity in decoding appears to be essential if skills such as comprehension, monitoring, integration, and reasoning are to be made proficient. Research also shows conclusively that operations that are initially slow, serial, and demand conscious attention become fast, less deliberate, and can run in parallel with other processes. In other words, once automaticity is starting to be established, decoding and comprehending are beginning to run in parallel. Accuracy, writes Diane McGinnis, is more important than speed because slow but accurate decoders could still comprehend what they read, whereas rapid and accurate readers could not. So the truth is that fluency follows accuracy and does not precede it. Your students' accuracy should increase before you'll see their fluency increase, okay? With decodable text, learners apply their knowledge, the phonics they're learning in class. It's a chance to apply them in the context of those whole words, sentences, and text, even the whole books. They help link the sound spellings and give lots of opportunity to practice and solidify their conceptual knowledge as well as their decoding skills. So using this deliberate structure, they're able to move from reading isolated words to reading full sentences. And decodable texts follow a systematic progression that matches the student's phonics instruction, enabling them to practice what they're learning in the context of connected text. So I'm going to give you a moment to read this quote from Kathleen Rassel from End the Reading Wars. So with our decodable text, we are giving that immediate opportunity to apply what they have learned to their reading, as she says. Okay, so it's that opportunity to apply immediately. So decodable texts are a necessary part of your phonics lesson. They provide the chance for students to use those sound spelling correspondences they're learning. They provide that practice. Many students need lots of practice in what they're using and what they're being taught in their phonics lesson. Decodable texts, like I said, aren't necessarily meant to be great literature. Their purpose is to provide that practice and reinforcement of what they've learned. Repetition is crucial to getting information, in this case, the letter sound correspondences, into their long-term memory. So when we're selecting decodable books, these are some things we need to keep in mind. The first is that they are actually decodable for students. We need to ensure that books that students are reading are consistent with their developing phonics knowledge and don't require them to use other strategies to work out words. We need to select decodable books that match the sequence of phonics they're learning, and that's vitally important so that students can decode every word as their knowledge of the alphabetic code increases. Decodable readers should provide practice of phonics skills and spelling concepts in coherent, logical manner. The book should have a clear focus. You should be able to pick up a book, and after reading just a couple of pages, you should be able to tell what the phoneme sound focus of the book is. The picture and story should not follow a pattern that is so predictable that students don't even have to decode the words on the page. And the text should encourage decoding, not guessing from pictures or the syntax of the sentence. And those decodable books should give students confidence and a sense of success so that they can grow into successful readers. Not all books marketed and labeled as decodable are decodable for you and your students. This will vary depending on the scope and sequence of the phonics progression you're using, but it's really important to remember students shouldn't be guessing words they can't decode. Within even very basic text that contains simple code, there will be words comprised of sound spelling correspondences that they haven't been taught yet. So within the Sounds Right scope and sequence, we teach a few very high frequency words that students will encounter within text in the very early stages of reading. Let me explain how we deal with this. Let's take, for example, the word is, which is one of the first high frequency words that we teach. The teacher will assist the child in reading the word is. Depending on the age of the student, the teacher might take complete control of the word and say, this is, say is here. Or they might say, this, pointing to the spelling S, is th, say th here. And the teacher may or may not add, yes, when you've been reading it before, it's s, but in this word, it's th. Can students cope with the drip feed of words comprised of sound spelling correspondences that don't conform to what they've been taught formally, or will they be confused? Well, the trick here is to introduce these words in context, to keep the explanatory language uncomplicated and consistent, and to keep building on what they have already been taught explicitly and give plenty of opportunities for practice. It cannot be said often enough that practice promotes automaticity, which in turn fosters experience. The approach works very effectively as long as not too many words of this kind are introduced at any one time. It is, though, important not to fudge them by telling the child that they're undecodable or tricky. They're valuable in as much as they offer little by little the opportunity to sensitize students to sound spelling correspondences they will be taught in the future. Such as an approach also begins to touch on the idea and conceptual understanding that a sound can be spelled in different ways, like C, K, and CK all representing K, and that many spellings represent more than one sound, like the O can represent the O in hot or in no or to, which will also be taught formally once they launch into the greater complexities of the code. So there are many books, as I said, claiming to be decodable available today. So how do you select the most appropriate text for a child? Well, the first thing is to make sure that text matches your scope and sequence. This is an opportunity to build trust in the code and the nature of the code and consolidate the letter-sound correspondences. It should be decodable for your student. Some books claim to be decodable and are not, or they just don't match your scope and sequence. But students shouldn't be guessing what they can't decode. When you're selecting an appropriate text for your students, be mindful that you don't want to always be aiming at the same unit you're teaching. We want them to have fluency in what they read and a high level of accuracy. So ensure an alignment to what they have been taught. And for students to feel successful from the very beginning, they need to have been taught the phonics before reading the book. Often when a student first reads a sentence, there will be quite a few words that need to be sounded out. Go back and get them to reread the sentence so that they can start to build smoothness. We want them to feel what it's going to be like when they know how to read, and this can be a stepping stone to get them moving in the right direction. A great deal of guided and then increasingly independent practice is necessary for students to develop accuracy, fluence, and automaticity. When material is practiced to a high degree of fluency, it can be recalled automatically and doesn't occupy as much space in working memory. When students achieve this level of mastery, they can devote their cognitive resources to monitoring comprehension and other high-level reading tasks. Some students will need more practice in applying their code knowledge and skills in reading more fluency. For these students, teachers can choose from parallel sets of books which contain code that has already been taught and they need to practice. How long should practice in decodables go on? Well, until the student has learned enough and can use enough of the code to read words accurately, and once they understand enough about the way in which the code works, and once their phonemic awareness skills are near perfect. So by the time students are ready to move away from tightly controlled text, they will have a sight vocabulary of several thousand words. When I say sight words, I mean words that students can decode automatically. It's so fast, it happens under the level of conscious attention. Most students can start to move away from decodable text around halfway through first grade. Although some students' word-to-text skills are so good, they may graduate sooner. Off the back of what they learn by this time, they can often bootstrap themselves, improving their fluency and learning more of the code through practice. You'll also want to keep data on student accuracy with decodable text to be sure that they're able to apply what they've learned. What comes next? Well, there needs to be a bridge between decodable readers and students becoming independent readers. Teachers are sometimes nervous about moving away from decodables, but if you're knowledgeable about the code and where you are with teaching it, you can select chunks of text which are still predominantly decodable, but are deliberately constructed to add in some sound spelling correspondences which have not yet been taught formally. Informational texts are ideal at this stage, as short chunks of text can be tackled in isolation, and at the same time, introducing students to domain-specific words or that tier 2 vocabulary. Old reading books can be used, and what we call it sounds right fluency fodder for a child at this stage in their reading journey. So please don't throw away those old reading books. They do serve a purpose. The teacher needs to be able to examine carefully any text they choose and decide that if there are words that the student might struggle with when they contain something not yet formally taught. So the teacher needs to decide how they're going to handle that. Are they going to pre-teach the word? Are they going to provide the bit of information that will be needed by the student when they come to that word? Or will they allow the student the opportunity to figure it out for themselves, being ready to intervene to teach through errors should they arise? Teachers who are Sounds Right trained and therefore understand how the written code works can plan to teach through errors using that consistent scaffolding, simple gestures, and clear, consistent, accurate language. So when you're doing this, we strongly advocate using a range of nonfiction texts. Again, these are particularly helpful with students to develop knowledge in the world in a context of developing knowledge-rich curriculum in school. Children's encyclopedias are great because they're bite-sized chunks of text. There are plenty of nonfiction books. Choose one which are rich in text, perhaps ones that relates to your curriculum or a topic that the child might be interested in, or that you know the child will need to know more about. Look through your libraries, at home, garage sales, lots of places you can find these books. John has written about reading in text on his blog as well. Most schools that use Sounds Right tend to find students no longer require decodable books beyond grade 1. This stage requires teacher support, and text should therefore be chosen very carefully, but they should also be difficult enough to make the students think and struggle a bit. The difficulty should be desirable, but in a good way, as Bajork would put it. We want to be encouraging students to make the transition from reading decodable text to reading any text they encounter. It's a transition that takes students from heavily scaffolded text through guided independence to independence. However, it's a process that needs to be carefully managed because any instruction that ignores the limits of working memory is unlikely to be effective. So how do families and carers support students as they learn to read? Well, do keep in mind that anything that is sent home should be practice, not new learning. Not everyone has the same level of support at home. Schools should explain to parents and carers that their children will be using decodable readers at school and that they will be bringing them home to read. Explain to them that these books enable children to practice the sounds and spellings they're learning, and that most of the words are words that can be decoded because they contain spelling they've already learned. The purpose of practicing reading at home is to consolidate their knowledge and increase fluency. Rereading is a highly effective way of increasing reading fluency, and even if a child seems to find it easy, the additional exposure will not only help their fluency, but will also help their spelling. There is help for parents and carers on the website on how to use decodables at home. And the all-new Sounds Right decodables and new edition of existing Sounds Right decodables contain a link to this guidance on the inside cover. You can also find advice and guidance for parents and carers by listening to one of our trainers in episode 12 of the Sounds Right podcast, Phonics for Parents and Carers with Donna Smith. So we also have 2 courses created for parents and carers. Both of these courses are free, and at present we've had around 50,000 participants. If your parents and carers complete both of these courses, they'll have an overview of what phonics is, what the initial code entails, and how to support their children with home reading and home learning. And the first course takes around an hour to an hour and a half to complete, and it covers units 1 through 7 of the initial code and introduces parents to word building, word reading, and sound swapping. The second short course is similar length to the first, and it covers units 8 through 11 of the initial code and introduces parents to dictation and sentence reading. You can find the link to the courses on the Sounds Right website under the Support and Resources tab for parents and carers that I just showed you. So this is the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve that you may be familiar with. I think it illustrates really clearly why repeated practice over time improves retention and getting information into long-term memory. We want the teaching of new code to take place in school with trained teachers. Home learning, including reading decodable text at home, should be about reviewing and retrieving previously taught code. So for example, you'll introduce new code in class. You'll then likely review that knowledge a few times, and then think about sending home tasks that encourage students to review and apply that knowledge. Structuring it in this way not only allows the teaching of reading to take place in school, but it allows students further opportunity to practice retrieving and reviewing prior knowledge. Remember, when we retrieve information after a delay, we make it stronger and more flexible. So home learning can be a great way to support this. This table should help you visualize that advice. When we teach new learning in school, we review that learning in school, and then we send it home for review. Home learning should not be new or relatively new material. It should be material the students are familiar and confident with. This is the same advice for decodable readers. Anything that is sent home should have been taught and practiced so that when it is sent home, it is review. So here are a couple key takeaways in regard to home learning. Some decodable, send them home after you've read them in class and you've done plenty of practice with them at school as well. Home learning activities should be qualitatively identical to activities used in class. You don't want the students to be trying a new thing and then practicing it incorrectly and making your job harder when they come back to school. Home learning should serve the purpose of reviewing knowledge and skills. Think about that forgetting curve and that chance to revisit information to get it into long-term memory. So let's talk a bit about the Sounds Right approach itself and what it entails. Sounds Right is a highly structured synthetic phonics program designed for whole class teaching of reading and spelling or interventions. It's highly structured in the sense that we teach from simple to complex, the roughly 175 ways of spelling the 44 sounds in English. Sounds Right is a cumulative program. Everything we teach builds on what has been taught previously, so we're constantly revisiting and there are multiple opportunities to practice. Sounds Right is multisensory. So students say the sounds, they see the spellings of the sounds, they hear the sounds, they write the spellings of the sounds, and all those senses are interacting to enhance the connection between speech and print. Sounds Right builds from simple to complex. We start with what is very simple, and we build on it in small steps towards what is more complex. That's across the scope and sequence of the program and within the units and the lessons. Sounds Right teaches both reading and spelling in every lesson. They develop in parallel, and many schools actually report seeing a huge leap in spelling almost as soon as they start implementing Sounds Right. Sounds Right is designed to start at the beginning of kindergarten, and it goes all the way through the elementary years and beyond, all the time employing the same consistent approach. So whether you're teaching math to a 4-year-old or chlorophyll to a 10-year-old, we use the same language and same error corrections when students make mistakes. We teach the essential phonemic awareness skills and conceptual knowledge required to become proficient readers and spellers. We also teach all the common representation for the sounds of English in the context of real words. So what are those essential skills? Well, there are 3 essential phonemic awareness skills: segmenting, blending, and phoneme manipulation. And these are taught very explicitly and are practiced in the context of reading and spelling words in every Sounds Right lesson from the beginning of the program. The conceptual knowledge teaches children how our alphabet code works. It's no good teaching them just what the code is. They need to understand how it works. And so we teach the 4 pieces of conceptual knowledge throughout the Sounds Right program, and we are consistent in our language throughout. From the very beginning, we teach that letters or combination of letters spell sounds. They do not say or make sounds, as to not undermine this conceptual understanding. So what does Sounds Right teach in the first year of school? You heard me talk a bit about initial code. Well, Sounds Right has come from many years of research and practice, and it draws heavily on cognitive science, in particular, what we know about the limits of working memory and the amount of exposure students require to get information that we're teaching into their long-term memory. So with very young children entering school and learning for the very first time, we need to take very small steps, limiting the amount of information that we're teaching and giving lots of opportunity to practice so that what we're teaching gets into their long-term memory. So for this reason, we start by teaching an initial code where we just teach the one-to-one correspondences, allowing children to build up trust in the reversible nature of the code. And we do that in the context of CVC words, such as mat or vet. Next, we teach that a sound can be spelled with 2 letters by teaching some double consonants using words like hill or buzz, but still in that context of CVC words. Next, we increase the complexity of word structure working with adjacent consonants still within that simple code. Now from there, we teach some consonant digraphs in Unit 11, and here we teach that you can spell a sound with 2 different letters. And finally, we end the initial code with our bridging unit, where we introduce the concept that a sound can be spelled in more than one way. We do this with the sound k being spelled by C, K, and CK, for example. In the extended code, we embark on teaching those 175 common spellings of the 44 sounds. We typically begin this when students enter first grade and teach the whole extended code throughout first and second grade. In first grade, we teach what we call the first spellings of a sound. This is where we teach the most common 4 or 5 ways of spelling a sound. We teach multiple spellings at the same time so that students develop the conceptual understanding that a sound can be spelled in different ways, but also so that a particular spelling doesn't become fossilized. And that's what can happen if they're taught in isolation. In second grade, we continue to work our way through the extended code. Some sounds like A, for example, have more spellings that are taught in grade 2. This enables us to revisit the previously taught spellings and to formally teach the rest of the most frequently encountered spellings. Of course, some of these children will have come across them already, and you may as well have taught them tangentially as they came up in your curriculum. So our structured scope and sequence is taught throughout grades 1 and 2, and then throughout elementary school, you can continue to teach the extended code, this time teaching some of the less frequently encountered spellings, such as the X in xylophone, which represents Z, or the KH at the beginning of khaki, which represents K. We also teach a structured approach to polysyllabic words. We don't assume that just because children can read and spell single-syllable words, they can apply this to polysyllabic words. Just like everything with Sounds Right, we teach from simple to complex. Polysyllabic word teaching begins in first grade and runs alongside the extended code. We teach all of this using 15 lesson scripts, 5 for the initial code, 5 for extended, and 5 for polysyllabic words. There are many reasons why we use scripted lessons. Scripts allow for consistency of practice across the schools. It's really important that all adults who are involved in teaching of reading and spelling use the same clear language. The scripts ensure plenty of practice and repetition, and they allow for interleaving within every lesson because you would use a few of the lessons within your half-hour phonics session. The scripts enable you to cover reading and writing in every lesson. And the scripts reduce cognitive load for the students so that they become so secure with the activities that their cognitive attention is on what they're learning and not on second guessing the new game or activity. It Sounds Right, we advocate for whole class teaching of phonics, and we train teachers in how they can scaffold to cater for all learners within that lesson, rather than putting students into ability groups. We believe that we can teach all but a very small minority of children to read and spell, and we believe that no child should be left behind. You may be thinking about a certain group of children or child in your class who is struggling to read and spell and might take longer to learn than their peers. Yes, some children do require more practice, and for that reason, Sounds Right can be used as an intervention program for either small groups or one-on-one teaching, and it can be used for keep-up and catch-up interventions. Crucially, we say that intervention teaching should take place outside of the whole class lesson, and we provide diagnostic assessment tools that teachers can use to identify the children who need intervention. As part of our training, we look at analyzing those assessments and interpreting the information they give, enabling you to plan effective interventions. So when you train with Sounds Right, you will be told how to use the many resources available that align with our scope and sequence. As part of our training, you get a manual that contains everything you need to teach. It gives the scripted lessons, word list, decodable text, dictation, and your scripted responses to teach through errors. You do not need to buy anything else to teach Sounds Right. In addition to what's included in your training and manual, all Sounds Right practitioners have access to our practitioner portal, which includes further resources, including more word lists, sentence for dictation, follow-up activities, whiteboard activities, as well as a library of professional development videos for you as teachers. All of this is available at no additional cost to anyone who's trained in Sounds Right. We have decodable books for the initial and extended code, including stories and informational texts. I will share with you more about our collections in just a moment. As well as being able to buy our books as physical hard copies, we also provide some collections as free ebooks. Sounds Right aims to provide as much reading material for free as we can so that all children have access to decodable text to practice their reading. It's not about buying the newest, shiniest book or resource. It's about having the skills and professional knowledge to use them effectively. At Sounds Right, we're all about teacher knowledge. You're skilled professionals who know your students, which is why our emphasis is providing you with a deep understanding of the science of reading and learning. When you visit the Sounds Right website, you will see we offer various training packages, allowing you to choose the option that best fits your need. Depending on the package you choose, you receive a range of benefits, including free places for administrators, book vouchers, places on master classes, and implementation support from Sounds Right trainers, including that access to the Sounds Right practitioner portal. If you scan the QR code, it will take you to the training page where you can see the upcoming courses. We are a training-based program rather than a resource-based program, and we strongly believe that knowledgeable staff, rather than gimmicky resources, is the key to ensuring all students learn to read and spell and can reach their potential. So let's take a look at our Sounds Right decodable books. We have many decodable text collections that are designed to go hand in hand with that Sounds Right scope and sequence I just shared with you. And we offer a wide variety of text types, themes, and content, giving students not only the opportunity to practice the sounds and spellings of the target unit, but also to build their vocabularies, general knowledge, and comprehension skills. This is a graphic that helps show the progression of the Sounds Right decodable text and takes into account various factors, including the complexity of words and sentence structure, as well as how tightly the texts are controlled. I want to walk you through our collections quickly and give you a bit more information about them. This is our Reading Together collection, and it's a series developed to facilitate reading with an adult. The series is designed so that the adult reads the more complex text, and the shorter, simpler, decodable selections that follow the Sounds Right scope and sequence are identified for the child to read. This means that children are exposed to rich vocabulary and narrative while practicing the skills and sounds that are taught in the initial code. There are 7 books in this series, and each contains 16 pages of illustration and text, and 2 pages of games and activities that promote students' oral language development and reading fluency. You'll see it has the 1 chili pepper for the level of difficulty, so you will see that used throughout. Our First Steps collections are perfect for children who are taking those first steps into reading. They have simple sentence structure and a short word count, which means children can get plenty of practice with the phoneme focus of each text without getting overloaded. The initial code First Steps collection is a series of 12 quirky stories about children and their unusual pets. And the extended code First Steps collection is a series of 10 fun stories about children and their hobbies. And both of these series are available for free as ebooks from our website. We have main collections of readers for our initial code and extended code. These books offer students engaging opportunities to put their skills and code knowledge into practice. These books have more words on the page and more complex structure than our First Steps collection. Our collections for sets of decodable readers for initial code is split into 2 sets, one for units 1 through 7 and another for 11. Our set for units 1 through 7 has 14 titles, so 2 for each unit, and our set for units 8 through 11 contain 10 titles. Oops. And then you can see an example here of our extended code. Select there. You'll see the more complex structure and a little bit more words on the page from the First Steps collection. This downloadable ebook is a collection of 47 poems for the initial code. The series includes 4 poems per unit for units 1 through 10, and 1 poem for each sound spelling covered in unit 11. And then we have our Fact Files collection. In our animal series, readers learn about lives, diets, and habitats of animals. This 10-book series begins at the end of the initial code and covers multiple units in the extended code, and it's a series aimed at learners in grade 1 and beyond. And then our Countries series it's designed to give learners practice consolidating their skills they've learned in the extended code. So they learn about geography, culture, and biodiversity of different countries, all while practicing the more spellings of the extended code. This collection of 10 books is aimed at learners in grade 2 and beyond. And I will say both of these series, I myself learned a great deal of information. So they really are knowledge building books for your students. And then we have WizWords, which is a phonics card tool aligned with the Sounds Right initial code, scope, and sequence. It aids that really early phase of reading and spelling development. And it comes with 164 cards to play 7 different games. And then it also comes with 2 write and wipe cards, 2 marker pens, and a bonus storage bag. So if you'd like to read about how Sounds Right has been successfully implemented in a range of settings around the world, you can head to our success stories section of our website, where there are a lot of very short PDFs written by practitioners, or you can read our case study book that is free online as well. All right, so this brings us to the end of the formal presentation of the webinar. Thank you so much, for taking time to be here with us today to hear a little bit more about decodable rooks. I'm happy to take some questions now, but I also want to make sure you have my contact details. So please do feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about decodable books, training with Sounds Right, or anything else I can help you with.